So after high school, I just moved out of my house and moved 3 hours away. I was like, I can't do this. Gotta go. And eventually I moved home and I met this man named Xavier. And I met him through a friend. Actually, I met him because we were trying to arrange a purchase of illicit substances for a rave that a bunch of us were going to.
Okay.
And
all right.
Yeah.
Okay. I did not know what the end of that sentence was going to be.
I know. I was like, how do I put this?
You were trying to score some Molly, maybe something.
Yeah, if we can be upfront, it was ecstasy.
Absolutely.
And
what are they going to do? Come and arrest us? No, they're not listening.
True.
They're not paying attention. It was a long time ago. So don't worry. Yeah.
So, and the thing is that like I had some connections, he had some connections, and we had this friend who was in the middle that was like, I don't want to be involved. And I was like, great, but you want the drugs. So, okay. So she linked the two of us up and we got to be friends. And then he and I ended up dating. And he was a really lovely, wonderful human. He was the kind of guy who would make friends with unhoused people, and when it was raining he would be like, I need to go take a jacket to my friend so and so, or like, I have extra sandwiches, so I'm going to go give them to my friend so and so because I haven't seen him for a while. I want to make sure he eats. Like, wow, that kind of thing.
And you by this time it sounds like you'd completely turned your back on the church.
Not yet.
No. Okay.
Not yet. I wasn't as heavily involved, but I certainly still believed that was probably correct. And that like, ultimately I'd probably end up going back to it wholeheartedly, but I was still I was just sort of in that middle ground where I believed that was probably correct, but also I was just at a point in my life where I'm kind of experimenting and doing things. But ultimately thinking like, I'll probably go back there, and also feeling tons of guilt and stress all of the time.
Okay. Yeah. So you're breaking the rules. Weird. You're scoring some ecstasy. You're going to a rave. You've got a boyfriend.
Yeah. And I had boyfriends before, and this was certainly not the first time that I had gone to a rave or done drugs. But again, it was definitely this like sort of split, right? Where one half of me is like, all of this is probably right, and I'm probably going to end up going back here. But then the other part of me is like, I want to live my life and do things, and I'm really tired of not feeling good in this situation either. And I was also really in the middle of a bunch of trauma that I had never healed or worked on, because I was 20.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was just like a lot of just trying to figure everything out. But certainly I would have told you that I still believed in God and Jesus and all of that. And he was a Catholic, not like devout in the sense like how I grew up, but certainly would have identified as Catholic. His family was very Catholic, all of that. So anyway, we were together for about a year. And in that year, we met right before he was moving to China to work. Yeah. Yeah. His uncle owned a hotel in China, and Xavier basically was trying to figure out what he wanted to do in life. And before he had met me, he thought, I'll go work at this hotel in China for a couple of months, travel a little bit, get some experience. If I like it there, I mean, it's his uncle, so he can give me a full-time job or any of those things. So naturally we meet pretty soon before he is leaving and decide, let's go for it. Yeah. So he went off to China for a few months. We stayed in touch, stayed together, and he came back about 3 months or so later. And in that 3 months, I had gotten a full-time office job. My partying had sort of died down a little bit. Like I was still doing things, but going out, but it wasn't as intense. I certainly wasn't doing drugs all the time and, all of that. And when he came home, he was still sort of in that partier mode, was going out a lot more than I was. Also, he wasn't working full time at that point because he had just come home. And as we went along, I sort of discovered that he had some issues with alcohol. Now, he wouldn't drink all the time, but when he did drink, it was just to excess. And like like to the point of just like passing out on whatever couch was nearby. And so it created an issue for us. But again, I hadn't dealt with my trauma from an alcoholic mother.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of not surprising, because when oftentimes if we grow up with one alcoholic parent, there's some part of us that finds someone with a similar issue because it fits our puzzle piece, so to speak.
Yep.
And yeah.
It's the comfortable chaos, right? You're like, I'm only
home.
understand
I'm
chaos.
Home.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen next. This is really scary. It feels like home.
But I'm used to it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we certainly had some issues with that because I felt like I couldn't trust him, but also I really cared about him. And when you're that age, you really think that like people are going to change.
Right. And you're 20 and you take it personally, especially when it comes to alcoholism. If you don't understand if you don't understand that it's a disease, if you don't understand how certain brains react, and they're actually I'm not a doctor, but some school of thought is that that an alcoholic's brain reacts differently to alcohol than a regular person's brain. So, and it just feels like, why are you doing this to me? And because what do you know? You're 20 years old, and yeah.
Well, and that's how I felt growing up. My whole life was like my parent never picked me; they always picked alcohol.
Yeah,
and
right. So as
I got older, I realized exactly. And as now I'm 32 now, and I've done a lot of therapy and continue to do therapy, and I've learned a lot of those things that it's not as easy as just like deciding not to drink for these people. It's just not. And so. So we had arguments, we had issues, but we stayed together. I still really cared about him. I wanted us to have a future together. And he eventually got a job, but it was a super sort of like paper pushing job that he didn't like. It was creating some issues for him. I could tell that he just wasn't particularly happy with his life. But certainly I thought he would sort through it and figure it out and, keep on keeping on. The thing about tragic events is that it's very tragic events or things that you're like, this only happens on TV. Like I distinctly remember having this thought, but in any event, so as summer came around, I turned 21 in May, and and I turned 21 in May. And then in late July, we had gotten an invite to go out to karaoke with some of his friends. So we did. He told me he was going to drive that night. He would be designated driver. He had a really big Suburban. So even if I wasn't drinking, it would have been challenging for me to drive his car at that point. Now it would be fine. But again, 21. And so we did karaoke. It was fun. We went back to his friend's house and he got really drunk and fell asleep on the couch. And I was really mad. One, because I was just tired of it happening over and over again. Two, I was drunk. So everything was elevated. Obviously. And again, 21 years old, lots of unresolved trauma. So one of his friends had asked for a cigarette or something to that effect. And I went to try to get it out of his pocket. He tried to push me away because he was half asleep or passed out or whatever. And I just lost it. And he and I got into a huge fight. Massive, the biggest fight we had ever had. And I distinctly remember being so mean because I just hit a point where I was just so frustrated and done. And I generally make it a rule, even at a younger age, to try not to go for the jugular when I'm fighting with someone, because I know it can do a lot of damage. And because I grew up in the household that I did, I'm really good at doing that.
I was going to say, did you grow up with a lot of verbal abuse? Was there verbal abuse in your house? Yeah. So when you grow up with that, you're really good at it. You're really good at it.
I can end an argument, but it might also end the relationship.
Yeah.
Right? We might not recover from what I say.
Yeah.
And so it's always been something that I'm really conscious of because I know how damaging these things can be. And for whatever reason, that night, it was like a perfect storm of just everything. And I unleashed. And it ended up, I mean, we were fighting in the parking lot of this apartment complex. And like, I've never fought with someone in public like that. I, to this day, have never done it again. It was just awful. And anyway, we ended up going home. Eventually things calmed down a little bit. I had taken his keys because I was like, I'm not letting you drive away from here. Like, no matter how angry I am, like, I'm not going to let you go kill yourself, like, driving your car somewhere. So his friends drive us back to my house. I was living away from my parents at the time, and he stayed over. And as the night progressed and we sort of sobered up, we sort of made amends. And, he said something to the effect of like, when I thought that I had hurt you, all I wanted to do was go home, get my dad's gun, and kill myself. And I was extremely shaken up by that statement because that's a very specific thing to say. It's not just like, I just wanted to like jump off a cliff, right? Yeah, or something like that. Like, I say stuff like that all the time, obviously in like jest. But this was extremely specific, and it really freaked me out. I think it would freak anybody out.
Yeah.
And I was like, you have to promise me that that's like,
not gonna
that's
happen.
not a thing. Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know where that came from exactly, but I need to know that that's not actually going to occur. And he's like, I'm just being dramatic. Like, of course not. Like, da da da. But it didn't sit right with me. It didn't sit right with me. And in the morning, he was supposed to go do some things, and then he had a shift at work at this job that he had just started at a restaurant with his best friend. And at this time, I lived with his best friend and his best friend's girlfriend. So we were all sort of very close
tight-knit group.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a kiss on the forehead. He said, all right, I'll see you later. And I said, okay. And off he went, and I just sort of went on about my day. I don't even really remember what I did earlier in the day, because it was just a normal day. I fell asleep at some point, and then I got woken up by a phone call, and it was from his sister. And his sister and I never really talked. Like, occasionally we would talk if we saw each other, but she certainly had never called me before. We didn't have a relationship like that. And she asked me if I knew where Xavier was. And I said, I don't know. He's supposed to be at work. I think he's at work. And she was like, he's not at work, or like, I don't think he's at work. And I'm like, well, let me call his friend really quick, and see, because his friend was also working that night. And so I got off the phone, I called the restaurant, and I asked for his friend. And I was like, hey, is Xavier there? And he said, no, why would he be here? And I said, well, because he told me he had a shift there. He said, no, he's not on the schedule for tonight. And I was like, you need to come home right now. Like, something is very wrong. I don't know what it is, but you need to come home. And so he did. And in that time, I had started calling his friends to see if maybe he was with them. And as I'm calling his friends, I'm getting a very similar response from each of them. So I would call and I would say, hey, is Xavier with you? His family is looking for him. We don't know where he is. And they would say, no. And I would ask them, okay, have you heard from him at all today? And they all said, yeah, he called us earlier to apologize for last night, to tell us that he was sorry for behaving that way, and that he loved us all, and that he wasn't going to be seeing us for a while.
Jesus.
And as I am making these calls, I mean, it's just like, it's like I know what has happened, but I can't accept that that has happened yet. And so I'm making these calls and I'm really starting to panic. And I get a call beeping in. And so naturally I pick it up and it is the police department.
Oh, honey.
And they're asking, sorry.
Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Of course.
Asking if they can stop by and speak with me. And I obviously said yes. And at this point, it's like, there's not another explanation, right? There's not another, there's just not. And so I wait for the police. And a cop comes over, he comes into my house. And honestly, at this point, it's like, I felt like I was watching myself have this conversation. And I just remember it was a really hot summer day. I was wearing shorts. I don't know why I remember that. And I had the police officer come into my living room and he starts asking me all of these questions. Have you talked to Xavier today? When's the last time you saw him? What has his mood seemed like over the last couple of days, weeks, months? And I'm telling him, and I'm like, do you know where he is?
Yeah.
And
you're asking the police officer that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm like, I'm happy to tell you this information, but like, I really need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And he says, we found a body.
Oh, honey. So sorry.
I asked him, like, is it Xavier? And they said, we can't tell you that yet because we haven't identified him. They hadn't had someone come in to identify him. And so they asked if I would come down to the police station. Sure, why not? At this point, I'm like, I'm just totally, I know that they found his body, obviously.
Yeah.
But they just keep saying they can't tell me until someone identifies him. And so I called his best friend or one of his best friends and was like, can you just come over and like come with me? And so went down to the police station, talked to the police for what felt like forever, until they finally said, like, yeah, it's him. They identified his body. So all of that day I had been texting him and saying, like, please tell me that that what you said last night wasn't serious. I'm really worried about you. Just like, I don't feel good about this. And he kept brushing me off and telling me that I was being, not that I was being anything, but that he had been joking. I don't need to worry. He's not going to do anything. It's fine. He was just being dramatic, which was very unlike him, which was why I was so uneasy about it.
Yeah.
And come to find out, he had gone home, gotten his dad's gun, driven up to a hiking trail location, which was very close to a family friend's house. And that family friend, their son, who had been very good friends with Xavier, had jumped off the roof of his dorm building.
Oh my God.
A couple of years before, maybe a year, 2 years before. And so he had gone up to this spot and shot himself, and he was found by two hikers, or just and when I say hikers, they were hiking, but this is certainly not a remote location. So they were just like people out for a trail walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, so that was one of the, I don't even have the words for what that was. It was one of it split my life into two pieces.
Yeah.
Before and after.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the worst part. Oh, go ahead.
Well, did you have anyone did you have any support? Did you have anyone that you could go to that could help you and support you? Because I feel like, I
was going to say, let's talk about loss number 2. So at this point, I had a really good friend, my best friend, who actually had been my first boyfriend, my first love. Really one of the only people I had ever fully trusted to just always be there for me. And he was always there for me. And he and I had been really good friends during my relationship with Xavier. He knew Xavier. He would come visit and hang out with me and like sit, Xavier would be there it was all good. We would talk on the phone like once a week, once every 2 weeks. We would end each conversation with like, all right, love you, like talk to you soon. Like he was just the closest person I had in my life, even though it was no longer a romantic relationship. And so I called him from the police station and he didn't answer. And I just kept calling because I was obviously not in my right state of mind. Called on repeat until he finally answered. And when he did, I obviously was just sobbing and hyperventilating. And I told him what happened. And so he stayed on the phone with me and, told me that he loved me, that he was going to help me get through it, that like, he would be there for me. He lived a couple hours away. He was going to drive up. He would visit. Like it would be okay, or as close to okay as it could be. Yeah. And so I said, okay, thank you. And I thought like, okay, I'm going to have this person who has been like a pillar for me for a long time come and help me. And he was the only person I wanted to see or hear from or talk to. Because he was really the only person I trusted wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And had he been part of your religion? Was he part of that group?
No, he hadn't been part of that group actually. And then he never talked to me again.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I guess that's not true. I shouldn't say he never talked to me again. About 8 years after the fact, he told my friend to tell me hello because she ran into her, and I sent him a message and he sent me one message back. And when I responded, then he just dropped off the face of the earth again. So that was, something. So, like, I don't want to say that was harder than losing Xavier, but it was.
Well, it's insult to injury.
I mean, hard.
Yeah. And when you think, who do I trust? Oh, there's one person. Yep. There's one person I trust. And they even say, don't worry, I'll be there. Or, don't worry, I'll help you through it. And then they disappear. That is crazy. So you, to this day, you don't even know what the rationale was or if there was any rationale.
Nope. And this was about 10 years ago.
So
10 years ago.
So how did you make it through, Jesseca?
I mean, to be honest, that's not even the full story of it. His friends also called me the night of his funeral and told me it was my fault that he killed himself. And yeah, like,
oh my God. And you're 21. You're 21.
I was just barely 21.
And you're also have been brought up in an environment that tells you you're bad and wrong and you're sinful. So then the person you love kills themselves, and then the people say it was your fault.
Yep. And then his family also stopped talking to me. And I don't actually even blame them for not talking to me because, like, I can't imagine how hard it would be to lose your son and then to see this girl that he was always with around, especially considering that one of our last interactions had been this
huge fight. Yeah.
Fraught. Yeah. And like there had been so many things slung back and forth, and like, I had said, oh, you pushed me, and then people heard that and thought I was accusing him of being like, like abusive, and it was a disaster through and through. But honestly, his family, I will stand by the fact that like whatever they needed to do to get through it was fine. And I have absolutely no hard feelings towards them whatsoever. I hope that they're doing well, and that they're healing. They deserve that.
This very compassionate and mature response you have to their reaction, was that something you had then, or that's something you've come to?
So,
I mean, probably in the midst of it, you go ahead. At first,
with the response to his family, at first I was, of course, hurt that I was just being shut out. But I sort of have always been of the belief system that like they're experiencing a loss that I can't imagine. And if this is hurting me this profoundly, like I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like to lose a son in that way. And so really they were very low on my, like, I don't want to say they were low on my like blame list, because I didn't blame them at all. But like when it came to like who I was hurt by, there was all I could think was they're doing everything they can to just survive. And that's,
so that's okay. I have to say though, that's pretty amazing that you were able to have that awareness then. So how did you, myriad of horrible things, of unspeakable things.
It was a really bad day.
It was a really bad day. It was a really bad day. Yeah. How did you make it through? Where did you find your strength? Where did you find support?
Well, oh God, I have to just give you this brief anecdote because I think you'll appreciate it. So the night of it wasn't his funeral. It must have been like his wake or something. A bunch of us went out to a restaurant, to a bar, and I was just sitting at the bar, and the bartender said something to the effect of like a smile or something. He was just trying to be he didn't tell me to smile, but it was just something of like, why so glum?
Yeah. Why the long face? And I was like,
I'm just having a bad day. Like I'm having a really bad day. And he was like, oh, come on. Like your day couldn't have been that bad. And I was like, I just left my boyfriend's wake. And he was like, okay. Like, okay. So just imagine the deadpan that I give, but like being told that like, yeah, my boyfriend killed himself and I just left his wake. So are we really going to have like a bad day competition? Like, just give me a drink. Like, I don't want to like, please.
Let's not have the bad day competition because I've got you fucking beat.
Right, exactly. Like you're not going to win this one, bud. So just,
oh my God,
just relax. But anyway, so all of this was happening, and something else that I had been taught in the church was very much that like when you're at your lowest and you're most brokenhearted and you know, whatever, that's where God will meet you. Because I was always taught that like sometimes you have to be at your very lowest in order to glorify God, or in order for God to like meet you in that place, and he's close to the brokenhearted and yada, 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 yada. And so I thought, okay, like this is certainly, I don't think there's not much lower that is going to go at this.
Yeah. And you've been waiting for God to talk back. So now's your moment.
Dog, like what's
God.
going on?
Yeah.
And a couple of things happened. One, it was like, it's very hard to believe in an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful God who has a plan for everything. When you are coming off of the back of your boyfriend shooting himself in the head, and then your best friend ghosting you, and then the friend group that you had for over a year blaming you and dropping you.
My God.
And yeah, I mean, and there's many other things that happened that I'm leaving out for the sake of, you know, length.
We should have had a two-parter.
Lord have mercy.
We should have had a two-parter.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to
Don't
get
be
back
sorry.
on
Don't be sorry.
on the train here. But I decided to go to something called Youth with a Mission, YWAM, and it's basically a Christian organization where they take young people anywhere from teens up until I would try to say probably like 25. And you go to a Bible school, which is not really a Bible school, but you do like a 3-month Bible intensive thing. And then you go on a missions trip. And I don't really know why I thought I should do this. I think I thought, well, I need to get out of here. Maybe if I go dedicate myself to serving the Lord, he'll finally connect with me and meet with me and like give me some
he'll finally return my calls.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe he'll call back. Shit. Like we have answering machines. I'm just pretending like he called and didn't leave a message.
Yeah.
So I thought I'll do that. Lord no. So I went to Switzerland for 3 months and did my Bible school. And then I went to, of all places, on my missions trip, Ireland. Side note, I love Ireland. I would love to go back. I would not love to go back on a missions trip. Yeah, no, thank you. But while I was there, nothing. I had a miserable time. Like I didn't, and everybody at this Bible school, and no shade, no hard feelings, but they were all basically homeschoolers from the Midwest. And again, no shade to them, but like, I'm coming off of these very traumatic events.
Right. You didn't find your people. You weren't like, no. Yeah. You were
I had tattoos. I had short multicolored hair. Like I was not one of them.
It was like that. What doesn't belong in this picture thing?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
like
what's she
one
doing
of these
there?
Things is not like the other.
Right.
And so also during this time, my grandmother passed away. And I was like, all right, I've had enough. I've seen enough. I've seen everything I need to see. I would like to go home. So I left early. And if anyone that knows me knows that getting me to leave a European country early is a miracle, because I would live there if I could.
Yeah.
So eventually I came home early. And I was pretty disillusioned with everything. But especially the fact that I had gone all the way across the world, basically, in this like pursuit of a God that was supposed to love me and was supposed to be there for me and was supposed to meet with me. That just couldn't seem to be bothered with me. Yeah. And honestly, I'd had enough people in my life that couldn't be bothered with me that I just thought, my God, this isn't right. That something isn't right. And so I came back and I knew that I wanted to go back to school. And I ended up, I had been friends with one of my teachers from high school. She was a very young teacher in high school, and we had connected and we stayed friends. And she's actually the reason that I ended up going to Mills. And a promise that I made to myself after Xavier died and while I was sort of healing was that I was going to do all of the things that scared me. Because I had felt like I had been living just really small and really controlled by fear of failing, fear of rejection, fear of all of these things. And now that I'm older, looking back on these experiences, it makes total sense why I had all of this fear. But at the time, I just felt like I'm not doing anything because I'm scared that it's not going to work, as opposed to trying it. And so this is what motivated me from going from fuck no, I'm not majoring in that, to going back the next day and saying, all right, I'll do it. Sorry.
Don't be sorry, honey. Don't be sorry.
And that is actually the reason that I did a number of other things. I became a CrossFit coach. I started weightlifting competitively. I took an internship that I was terrified of. And it was all incredibly rewarding. It was some of the best choices I've ever made. But people say like they're living for two people, and I feel that way a lot. But I don't think it's living. It doesn't feel like living for two people. It feels like trying to live enough life. I don't even know how to phrase it. It just feels like you're trying to make up so many experiences and so much ground. And the void is impossible to fill. It doesn't matter how much you do. It doesn't matter how many things you try, how many things you say yes to. There's always that missing person that can never be replaced, no matter how much you live. Oh,
honey.
Yeah. So sorry, you're asking how I got through it. And the answer, honestly, is that I don't really know. I certainly had friends, I don't want to discount them, that especially during the early stages would come and make sure I was okay, bring me stuff. But as anybody that's experienced loss, and I'm sure if you've experienced loss, after the first month, everybody's life goes back to normal.
Yeah.
And your life doesn't go back to normal.
Yeah. Well, and especially the way it happened, it's not like, the way you lost Xavier, after the fight, after so many texts, after, so then you lose him, then you lose the friend, that one friend, then you lose the friend group. So it's just loss. And then I'm guessing, or I'm filling in a blank, that you also lost this, you sort of gave up this idea that there's this God that's going to someday come along and take you by the hand and say, yeah, you're okay. I got you, Jesseca. Yeah. You get to be in this group. You're a part of this group. So the loss was loss piled on loss. And I will say that's beyond anything that what you're describing to me is beyond anything that I've experienced. And I'm glad for that. I just want to just take little baby Jesseca in my arms and hold her, because it's so heartbreaking. And I am trusting that you worked on this a lot in therapy.
Oh, absolutely. And there's still times I work on it.
And of course there is. Of course there is. Of course there is. Because the trauma is so big, and to have happened when it happened and how it happened, and because of who you were when it happened. I mean, it's so much. It's so big. And I just want to tell you, and I know you know this, but I want to say it again. Wasn't your fault. Wasn't your fault.
Yeah.
Wasn't your fault. Wasn't your fault.
That is something that I certainly, I know fault. That it's just, it took me a long time to transfer that knowledge from my brain to my heart. From knowing that you can't control other people's actions, to really understanding that if it hadn't been that, it would have been something else. And part of the reason that I speak so openly about it is that I never knew anybody that had experienced this kind of loss. And I'm glad that they hadn't, but also I really needed somebody that had a clue, a clue on how to manage any of this, because nobody did. And I was getting a lot of, and people, something I will stand by until the day I die is that sometimes you should just shut the fuck up and sit with somebody. That's it. But I didn't need anybody telling me that it's going to get better. I didn't need anybody telling me that everything happens for a reason. I genuinely had someone tell me what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I looked them dead in the eye and said, it killed him. Just be quiet. And that's not because I think people mean well.
Oh,
absolutely,
they do. They do. It's where's the rule book for that? There's rule book for how do you help someone who's gone through this kind of loss? What do you say? People don't know what to say.
Absolutely.
Because how do you know? How do you know what to say? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But part of that is that now I know people that have lost their partners in different ways. But it's, that experience has allowed me now to say, there's nothing that I can say that's going to make this better. There's nothing. But I'm here and I'll sit with you whenever. I'll sit with you. I'll hold your hand. I'll hug you. I will let you tell every story you have about this person. Because sometimes when you lose someone, that's all you want to do is just talk about the memories, because it helps you feel close to them. And at a certain point, people start to get tired of it. I will never get tired of hearing people's memories. Never. But yeah.
Well, I don't even have to ask you. Normally I ask, what would you say to somebody? But I feel like you just gave such really, really good advice, just to sit with someone, just to listen. Sometimes you can even just say, what is it that you need? What do you need?
Absolutely.
I mean, my best friend had breast cancer and she's fine now. But, when she was going through chemo, I would go to her house and I would say, just tell me what you need. Do you want me to tell you stupid stories and distract you? I can do that. Do you want me to listen? Do you want me to braid your hair? I will do whatever you want. You tell me.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
And so what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. God,
I'm not the one to say that.
God doesn't give you more that you can handle. Like, it's like when I used to hear that, it's like, yeah, what about the people that are in insane asylums, or that's a very old fashioned term, or have killed themselves? I think God gave them more than they could handle. I'm guessing.
Right.
I'm guessing.
Just a guess. Shot in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think what's great is to hear you be able to say, this is what I needed. And that maybe if you know someone who's had a big loss, maybe that might be what they need too.
Yeah. Because I distinctly remember telling the people that were closest to me, like, I don't want to hear that it's going to get better. Like, I know that if you stay alive long enough, things will heal, or at least won't be as painful. But right now, I am so deep in a pit that, like, hearing that it's going to get better just makes me want to throw you out of my window.
Yeah. And it has no meaning. Like, it has no meaning, because this is where I am now. This is where I am now.
Exactly.
Well, I just thank you so much for that. I did not see that coming. And I don't know how I would see that coming, but it was really so heartbreaking and beautiful. And I just think that, I was going to say you're such a strong person. And I think that, strength, using that expression can be misinterpreted, because, I think one of the strongest things one can do is be vulnerable. And so you do have this huge willingness to be vulnerable and be real and to not know, and I've seen all that in your TikTok feed. And so that willing to be vulnerable, willing to be honest, it's such a gift to other people, because it gives other people permission to be vulnerable, because the being stoic, I always say the size of the thickness of your armor, the thickness of my armor was in direct proportion to the thickness of my wound. And I needed a very big armor to survive what I went through. And it took a long time for that armor to be taken off. And you have survived that. And you, to me, are a person who's thriving and who's
doing my best,
who's funny and smart and is a giving person, continues to be a giving person. And that's pretty amazing, because there's a lot of different ways you could have gone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of different.
I certainly used to feel like being tough and cold and hard was strength. And I was that way for some time. But I realized that, there's a quote, and I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it basically says something about being soft in a hard world is strength. And it's something that I've really sort of clung to, because I could be hard and I could pretend like nothing hurts, and I don't have to be vulnerable about anything. But who is that helping? Who is that serving? How is that making the world any better in any way? And so I have tried my best to be honest and vulnerable about these things, because I want to be able to be there for other folks that are either A, experiencing some loss or some severe loss, or B, are in the same place of pain that he was. But that he didn't feel comfortable to reach out to people and get that help. And so now, and that's just who I am now. And I'm grateful that whatever, powers that be, whatever people that came along in my life have allowed me to be that way. Yeah. And I really think that actually a lot of the teachers that I had in college, because it was so close after, are part of the reason that I ended up healing, because
Fantastic.
they held so much space for me.
That's so great.
I will never, ever be able to repay them for that. So,
but you know what? They don't need to be repaid, because that's, especially teachers, people that go into that field for the right reasons, that's why they're there, to give that space. And that's their gift. That is the gift that they get to have, is seeing Jesseca, seeing 23-year-old Jesseca, and seeing her pain and seeing her talents and seeing her potential, and going, oh, let's give her some room. Let's give her some guidance, Oh, you killed me. You killed me.
Sorry.
Oh, no, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Okay. So we end with 3 questions. Okay.
I
should have told you, bring some tissues, honey.
I don't really cry that frequently, so I was. It caught me off guard. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. Gee, I wonder why. You cried. Pretty fucking sad story, honey. Man. Okay, I'm a crier.
It's just a bad day.
I'm a bad weeper.
Losing it. Losing it. If you